Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pathway for Congress to Pass an Expanded Child Tax Credit, a key policy to address childhood hunger, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, Communications Manager at FRAC. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 60 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, select Show Captions, it's the CC button in the bottom taskbar, and choose English as the spoken language. At the end of the presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. To ask a question, please use the Q&A tab in the bottom taskbar. With that, I'll pass it off to Alex Ashbrook, Director of Root Causes in Specific Populations at FRAC.
Today's webinar could not be more timely as USDA just released the hunger numbers for 2022, their annual report on food security in America. And the news is not good and very much mirrors the recent data on how childhood poverty doubled in 2022. 1 in 8 households in America struggled with hunger in 2022, up from 1 in 10 in 2021, and nearly 4.1 million children lived in households that experienced food insecurity in 2022, which is about a 45% increase from 2021. These numbers underscore the importance of this webinar and the urgent need for Congress to pass an expanded and inclusive child tax credit. These increases in childhood hunger underscore how vital it is to have anti-hunger stakeholders at the table, championing the importance of the child tax credit as an essential strategy to end hunger. For those of you who were attending or listening to the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health that took place a year ago, you may remember hearing President Biden tout how truly transformational the child tax credit in the American Rescue Act was in addressing hunger and how ending hunger in America demands the passage of such a policy. How hunger is a political choice, and we know what policies are needed to end hunger, and we need Congress to act to pass the child tax credit. You also heard the claps and saw the standing ovation from the audience signaling that we as anti-hunger advocates are committed to an expanded child tax credit. We are so glad you are here today to learn more about the huge impact the child tax credit had on addressing hunger and how you can work to get this child tax credit passed at the federal level. Welcome. I'm Alex Ashbrook. I direct FRAC's Root Causes and Specific Populations team. A quick word on FRAC. Next slide. FRAC works to create a nation free from hunger so that all families can thrive. We do so through advocacy, by advancing bold and equitable policies, and through partnerships. So speaking of partners, I want to introduce our fabulous panel. First, we have Susan Bodine, who's from the Root Cause and Specific Populations team. Susan's going to walk us through FRAC's new report that lifts up the importance of the CTC to our work to end hunger. And Susan was the primary author of this report, which I know you all will find incredibly useful to your advocacy work. Then we'll hear from Anna Arroyo, Senior Director of Campaigns at the Economic Security Project. Anna's group is the go-to org for anything tax-related that can help support people who are struggling to put food on the table, among other struggles, and her group works to improve equity. Anna is a patient advocate. She can readily translate complex tax policy into actionable steps, which is hugely appreciated from someone who skipped all the tax courses in law school. And she's also a passionate advocate who fights relentlessly to figure out how to get vital legislation over the finish line. And she's also a dedicated advocate as she is coming to us directly from a phone booth on Capitol Hill's Longworth building. Anna's going to be discussing the components needed for an expanded and inclusive CTC and why it's essential, especially for families with low incomes. And last but not least, we'll hear from the wonderful Caitlin Peruccio, who's the Legislative Counsel and Senior Advisor to Representative Rosa DeLauro. So Caitlin is a member of the Hills Dream Team, the staff of Representative DeLauro. She epitomizes what a wonderful public servant should be. And I dare say many of you know her if you work on anything related to social justice. She'll share an insider's view of the American Family Act and opportunities to make an expanded and inclusive CTC stick this year. Maybe if we're lucky, she'll also tell us who's going to be the next Speaker of the House. So we're really appreciative of you all joining us and taking the time to be here, especially given what a busy time is, especially for what's going on in the House of Representatives. So special shout out to Caitlin. All right, without further ado, Susan, let's get going.
Thank you, Alex. So as Alex mentioned, I'm Susan Bodine with FRAC's Root Causes and Specific Populations team, and I'll be sharing today a bit on the 2021 Expanded Child Tax Credit, or CTC, and its powerful positive impacts for households with children when it comes to food sufficiency and related factors. So as a quick level set, and Anna will be talking more later on about the details of what a lot of this means, but just to ground us for the research, the American Rescue Plan Act expanded the CTC for 2021 with several key changes. It increased the maximum credit amount, sent households monthly payments, expanded eligibility to include 17-year-olds, and it made the credit fully refundable. So that last piece is particularly important to our work because it opened up the CTC to children and households with the lowest or no income. And these are households who are typically locked out of receiving the full or any CTC credit. And it disproportionately affects Black and Latinx children, young children, children in single parent families, in rural areas, in families with a veteran or an active duty military member, and children in larger families. And as anti-hunger advocates, we're focused on bolstering this, as Alex said, because the 2020 expansion dramatically boosted CTC's ability to address hunger, to address poverty, which is a foundational root cause of hunger, and to help address racial disparities. So there's a strong and growing body of research really showing these impacts that we'll be talking about some now. So next slide, please. FRAC has a new research brief out that highlights the profound impact of the expanded CTC when it comes to helping families put food on the table. And the brief helps anti-hunger advocates and nutrition stakeholders really easily make the case as to why this expanded and inclusive CTC is essential to fighting hunger and why we need to reinstate essential provisions that were included in the 2020 expansion and further grow those. So I'm going to do a really quick hit list on some of the key components of the brief, and we hope you'll check it out to really dig in more on the research that's featured in there, both pulling together great research from around the country, as well as some new FRAC research. And we hope you'll leverage that information in your work. So in this new brief, we dig in on the 2021 expanded CTC's impact on food sufficiency, on food purchasing, as well as some on child poverty. So in terms of food insufficiency, there was a really immediate important impact. Several research studies found that receipt of the 2021 expanded credit was immediately correlated with lower levels of food insufficiency as soon as the first monthly payments were issued in July 2021. So here you can see this credit with the little house graphic, and that highlights a stat from a Children's Health Watch study that found a 26% reduction in food insufficiency among households with children after the first CTC payment. That's huge. And studies found that the strongest impacts for the CTC on food insufficiency were among those households with the lowest income, particularly important to our work. And this again underscores the importance of opening up the full CTC to families with the lowest income. And so that was just the starting point and showed how important it was really immediately. And then there's a number of subsequent studies that look at longer periods of time when households were receiving the 2021 expanded CTC, and they reinforce how the expansion substantially continued to reduce food insufficiency for families. And I want to emphasize here that several of the studies show how much the advanced monthly payments that families were receiving were particularly important for mitigating hunger. And the brief also zeroes in on impacts at the state level with data analyzed by researchers from the Social Policy Institute at Washington University in St. Louis. So using census pulse survey data, the researchers found the rates of food insufficiency declined in most states after receipt of the 2021 expanded CTC. So you'll check out the report, I hope, and you can see data for your state in that brief. And as I mentioned, we also looked at food purchasing studies, and those showed that as families received the expanded CTC, nationally, the majority of households quickly spent those monthly advance payments, really emphasizing the importance of that cash infusion for households to be able to use those on their expenses. Families reported spending the funds on day-to-day expenses, with food being the most common category, and reported that the monthly advance payments helped households to buy better quality food and or buy more food. So really essential to helping families put food on the table. So we have a great breadth of national level studies that are noted in there for you to check out. And then to look at the state level, FRAC's research scientist, Allison Lacko, also conducted a new analysis using household pulse survey data. And so with this analysis, it really reinforced the importance of the monthly CTC advance payments to households in every state when it came to food purchasing. And there was particular importance to households with lower income against a comparison of households with higher level incomes, and to Black households with a comparison to white households. And that held true across many states. So you can check out information on that for many states in the brief. Though I do want to note, because of sample sizes, we weren't able to include analysis for every single state when we dig in on the comparisons at income level and the comparisons with race. And so again, looking back at our great graphics here, the brief highlights some data about the impact on poverty of the expanded CTC. So there's a lot more in the brief, but I'm gonna, for the sake of time, move really quickly through this one. But you can see here just how transformative the expanded CTC was when it came to addressing child poverty. From 2020 to 2021, child poverty was cut nearly in half. Again, astounding results here. And you can see the graphic showing that 46% reduction in child poverty. And furthermore, children who had been locked out of receiving the full or any CTC prior to the 2021 expansion experienced really significant reductions in poverty, and that helped to close poverty gaps and disparities across groups. So as you can tell from that really short summary of just a huge, dense body of research, the 2021 expanded CTC was a powerhouse and really essential for helping households with children put food on the table. And I also wanted to note that, of course, we're focused in on food security. So that's where the emphasis of our brief is and the information here. But there's a great research out there looking at other social needs, such as housing, health, employment, and pieces like that. So I encourage you to also check out other pieces if those are work you intersect with as well. So next slide, please. All right. So even with these incredible impacts, positive effects for family, all of this research really reinforcing those, the 2021 CTC expansion expired. So without that permanent expansion, an estimated 18 million children, so that's 26% of all children, get less than the full credit or no credit at all because their family's income is too low. And that 18 million children includes more than 90% of children in households with income below the poverty line. And because of systemic racism and other structural factors that drive disproportionately low wages for certain communities, we also see that certain children, again, are being disproportionately left behind with the current CTC. So that means that 38% of Black children, 40% of Latinx children, 48% of children living with a female single parent, and 35% of children in rural communities are currently ineligible for the full CTC. And there's a really strong set of research focused on the harm to households with children after the expanded CTC ended. So there are many, many examples of this, but for time, I'll just highlight two, which you can probably guess from the ones we talked about earlier what those effects were. But essentially, so child poverty surged at a really unprecedented rate after the end of the 2021 expanded CTC, and that rate, child poverty rate, more than doubled between 2021 and 2022. And households with children also reported substantial increases in food insufficiency. So the flip side is there was a 25% increase in food insufficiency in 2022 after the expanded CTC's monthly payments were gone. So that's just a quick taste of some of the core impacts of the expanded CTC when it comes to hunger and poverty, and pieces in the research brief. We really hope you'll check out the full brief to dig in on the scope of the research studies that are highlighted in there, the original FRAC research, and how you can better bolster your work, including with some ideas on how you can engage to support and bring the anti-hunger perspective to your partner's CTC efforts. And we're really excited today to have such fabulous speakers who can help give that perspective. So I'll turn it back to Alex.
Thanks so much, Susan. I just wanted to share, before we hear from Anna, I just wanted to share a reflection from someone who is getting the CTC, the expanded and more inclusive CTC. When getting the CTC, you didn't have to decide, should I go to the market and pick between the chicken, the beef? I find myself, again, having to make these decisions with the expiration. Someone also said, it was comforting to me to know that I was able to put food in our refrigerator, put food on the table. I never had to worry about being hungry with the expanded CTC. All right, we're going to turn it over to Anna, who is going to become Superwoman and jump out of the phone booth and share us how we're going to get this passed. Anna?
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Aurelio. I'm the campaign director at the Economic Security Project. Really great to be here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and the Economic Security Project. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the key pieces of the child tax credit that really turn it into a super policy. Then I'll talk about polling and just leave this screen right here. So whenever anybody, Jaded Hill staffer, I know that's not you, Caitlin, says, oh, people don't care about the child tax credit since it expired 2 years ago. You go, no, 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 no. Support is as strong as ever. Bipartisan support is as strong. So we'll walk through that and then talk about momentum and the path ahead and try to do that all in 10 minutes. And as Alex said, I'm here in a phone booth, so sorry about the sound, in the Longworth House Office building. And the reason I'm on Capitol Hill doing this webinar is because the Economic Security Project has partnered with the Global Women's Strike. And there's 22 moms and caregivers and grandmothers on the Hill today talking to members of Congress on both sides of the aisle about why it's really, really important to expand the child tax credit and also the earned income tax credit. And they're saying that from the perspective of caregivers. So I want to add to Alex's stories, which is, you know, I was with a woman named Carolyn Hill from Philadelphia. And she said, you know, her community is very impoverished. There's a lot of violence there. And when they had the child tax credit, not only could they make ends meet better and get food, but people had community cookouts and people came together over food and built community. So it's both the actual nutrition physical nutrition, and it's also spiritual, right? Bringing people together. And you all as food activists know that more than anybody, but I wanted to just bring that to the space here. So a little bit about me. I've been doing progressive advocacy for 30 plus years, and I'll keep doing it until we solve all the problems. And let me tell you that poverty and hunger are problems we know how to solve. And we saw that with the census poverty data. And we saw that with the child tax credit. And that's why I think it's so critical, and so happy to see you all on this webinar today. And so critical that we keep pushing along with the leadership of Congresswoman DeLauro and our excellent staffer, Caitlin. Economic security, we're dedicated to building economic power for everybody. And that means making sure people have the freedom and stability to thrive. So now I want to go through the parts of the expanded child tax credit that did that gave people freedom and stability to thrive. So freedom it's cash. No one is telling you how to spend it. We are giving families, we are giving caregivers, we are giving parents the agency and the decision-making power to spend it how they best know how to spend it. And it turns out, if you look at all the data, and Susan went over some of this, people spent it on necessities, food and rent, and keeping the lights on. And they're very good at prioritizing, right? So one superpower of the expanded child tax credit is that it's cash. And more importantly, as Susan alluded to, we need to make it fully available to all low-income families. And in jargon terms, that means making it fully refundable. So it's not dependent on the amount of income you earn, but it's fully available to all people who are taking care of children. And that's very, very important, especially from the perspective of the caregivers I was at with this morning, some of whom are moms taking care of disabled children. Their work is probably the hardest out of anybody in this room, and they don't actually earn a wage. And so therefore, they're ineligible for the child tax credit as it stands right now. If you are a single mom with one child under the current child tax credit, you have to earn $25,000 before you get the full credit. If you are married, filing head of household with 2 children, you have to earn $42,000. So the 18 or 19 million children who are left out of the full credit, many of their parents are actually working and earning wages. And I would say the vast majority of them, their parents are working, taking care of them as well, because as we know, caregiving is one. So the biggest superpower of the child tax credit is making it fully available to all low-income children who right now are cruelly left out. That's 19 million kids, disproportionately Black and Latino. And those are the kids whose families really, really need it the most. They're struggling the most to keep up with the rising cost of living. The second structural piece that is really, really important is making it monthly. Why is that so important? It's important because the bills come monthly. And it's important because when people who are living paycheck to paycheck run out of money, what they turn to is the neighborhood check cashing shop or the pawn shop or even selling their blood plasma. All of these things are very risky financially and physically as well. And unfortunately, what research has shown is people who rely on these risky financial high interest type measures, they end up, when they get their lump sum earned income tax credit or child tax credit refund at the end of the year, they end up servicing the debt. So that money is going to debt. It is not going to actually spending for the things that they need. And so what our research has found is if you make the child tax credit monthly, 30% more children on average on a month-to-month basis are pulled out of poverty. And in fact, it's because people can meet their bills when they're due. Finally, I want to say that in 2017, the Republican Congress doubled the size of the child tax credit, and they showered more than $1 trillion of tax breaks on wealthy people and corporations. The other thing they did, though, is they kicked 1 million immigrant children out of the child tax credit. So they lowered taxes on wealthy people on the backs of immigrant children. And so a priority for us is making sure those immigrant kids whose families filed with ITIN numbers get restored eligibility in the tax credit. So those are sort of 3 of the structural pieces we look for. Obviously, we'd love to see the size of the credit expanded as well. And all of those measures and more are in Rosa DeLauro's American Family Act, which I have to say, almost every Democrat in the House of Representatives is now a co-sponsor. And so that's the gold star. That's what we need. So now we'll go into the public support, because obviously the House can't even vote on a speaker, much less expanding the child tax credit. And so what am I doing here in the Longworth House office building? Why am I wasting my time? I'm not, because the public strongly supports it. So if we look at this first slide, this is a poll that was done in early September, and it basically shows that expanding the child tax credit is very important in the Northeast and the South and the Midwest and the West and the Mountain West, rural communities, red states, blue states, purple states, Democrats, independents, Republic. I want to call out in particular Republican parents, 77% support expanding the child tax credit. So let's go to the next slide and dig in a little bit more. Okay. Then the very strongest messages in support of the child tax credit, and there's a dog barking in the background. Sorry, I don't know. Someone's got a dog in Longworth. They want the child tax credit expanded. The strongest messages is just to speak plainly about how it helped people. And so again, as food activists, you are really important spokespeople for talking about how important this was to make sure that people had essentials like food and better food, right? I was with a mom who was talking to Senator Bennett from Colorado, and he said, what do you mean better food? She's like, well, my kids like bananas and blueberries, so I could buy them bananas and blueberries. So let's speak about real things. Jobs, cutting poverty, keeping people above water, but really talking about how people spent it on the essentials is really important. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and then here's the place where I'm just going into Republican offices and hammering away at their outdated notions of what is work, because they keep saying, oh, we can't make it fully available to all low-income kids because then people will quit their jobs. Number one, people won't quit their jobs for $300 a month child tax credit. Number two, people are working. Motherhood, parenthood, caregiving, that is work. And as we talked about before, people who are working don't make enough to make the full credit. And you'll see that saying that the tax credit is made fully available to all low-income and middle-class families has 82% support. And if we look at the next slide, sorry, before that one. Oh, sorry, I must have missed a slide. Anyway, 77% of Republicans believe it should be made fully available to all families, and also 71% of parents support making it monthly. So that is public support. That's why we're here. The public supports it, and moreover, the public needs it, and it's a proven economic benefit to families across the country. Finally, here's a little bit more on the path ahead. So how do we get there given the divided Congress? It turns out corporate America is up right here, walking past me. Their lobbyists are wanting extensions of their corporate tax breaks. And so we, along with Congresswoman DeLauro and Democratic leadership, have built a blue wall that says, you are not getting any corporate tax breaks extended unless we can deliver for families, unless we can expand the child tax credit. And look at this number, 81% of the public absolutely supports that, including 71% of Republicans. So that's the polling. Now, next slide. Well, Congress hasn't been, oh, sorry, back to the map of the states, whatever that last slide was. There we go, excellent. Okay, so while Congress has been stalling out because different leadership is in power now, the states have seized on the popularity and the importance of this. And in 2021, 7 states had a child tax credit. I'm happy to say that right now, October 25th, 2023, we have 14 states with a permanent state level child tax credit, and many other states worked on expanding that, modernizing that, earned income tax credit as well. So this is a map of the political power of this issue at the state level. And so every single one of these members of Congress and senators from these states have been getting updates from these states about how they need to do the child tax credit. And we're working very hard and hope to work with all of you and making sure that federal office holders know that there's been progress in the states and this is important. So that was a little bit about how important this is, the key issues, how the public supports it, the momentum from the states, and the path ahead is rocky. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but it is possible. Corporate lobbyists are up here wanting their corporate tax breaks. Democrats in the White House are insisting that we need the child tax credit extended. There's bipartisan support, both in the public and in state houses across the country for doing this. And so we need to bring that power into the Congress and keep pushing until we get it done. So there's still a path to try to get this done at the end of the year or early next year, alongside some of the big government funding bills. Caitlin will tell you more, but hoping to work with each and every one of you to make this a reality.
Thanks so much, Anna. Well, Caitlin, we're going to hopefully get some words of wisdom from you on how we navigate this rocky road.
Well, a rocky road it is indeed. I think they're about to gavel in to see if we'll have a speaker today. Time will tell. I don't have any insights, but it's so lovely to be with all of you, and thanks to everyone who's tuned in on their lunch hour to talk about the child tax credit. I'm Caitlin Peruccio. I'm Rosa DeLauro's legislative counsel and senior policy advisor. I've been with her over 5.5 years, and we've seen so much movement in this space. We joke that back in the day we couldn't pay people to talk about it. Rosa would call herself the crazy aunt in the attic talking about this, but we really found a moment in the pandemic to say we know what will help kids and families best, and that's the child tax credit. And it's in large parts to partners like FRAC and Anna at ESP and a number of others to really help move the needle on this. Anna went over the details. Monthly is so critical. I will say there were folks out there that are like, people don't want it monthly. They want it at tax time. And we're like, well, maybe let's see how, people would like to receive their money and how they'll spend it. And we learned people like getting it monthly because they have bills. We were also told IRS can't do this. Maybe we give them till September. They got it done in July. And, if you're a nerd like me, you were really excited to read the Treasury Inspector General's report that said that 98% of the child tax credit payments were sent successfully. And if Rosa were here, she'd tell you, name me another program that has worked this well in such a short amount of time. And so, she has reintroduced the American Family Act with she's a member of the CTC 6. We've got great partners in Congresswoman Susan Del Bene of Washington State, Congressman Richie Torres, and I always point out his district is the poorest in the country. And we had data about the poverty reduction with the expanded CTC, and you look at the category, the column is just regular poverty reduction, and then you had deep poverty reduction, and the regular poverty, we're like, oh, that's kind of low. The extreme poverty and deep poverty was skyrocketed because kids in that district moved from extreme and deep poverty into just regular poverty. So I always think about his district when I think about this policy. And I think it was around 70+% kid left behind, which is of note. Mike Johnson, who may or may not be our speaker, who can say, has in the old map had 56% of kids in his district left behind. Similar with Congressman Jason Smith of Ways and Means. He's over 50% as well in the old district maps. Nothing the Republicans have proposed in the Ways and Means Committee would actually help these families. So just throwing that out there. The child tax credit as designed by the American Rescue Plan is that solution. I do want to flag, so it's basically what everyone saw during the American Rescue Plan. We did add in the American Family Act a new provision that we're kind of excited about. It's called the baby bonus. I didn't coin that. It was a journalist. Thank you, creatives, for coming up with that. But essentially, just want to flag this. Since 1997, if you had a child born on December 31st, they would be eligible for the full child tax credit come tax season in February. A child born on January 1st would have to wait until the following year. So what we've decided to do is that every child in their first year of life should receive the same benefit. So we've increased that monthly benefit for the first month payment just to keep kids on a level playing field. I also use the example, I'm a twin. There's stories of twins every year. They're born in different years. So one kid's going to get the CTC and one kid's not. We're trying to make that equitable. And so that's a new feature of the American Rescue. My God, not the American Rescue Plan. Sorry, the American Family Act of 2023. I would just note some of the messages that you all can use when, you're meeting with folks. First off, use personal stories. Tell them we have all the data. People spend it on food, which is why we're all here today, housing, childcare. Maybe their kids could go on a field trip for the first time. And also, I should apologize. My desk is very messy, so I'm going to try to cover that up for a minute. And there is data that shows for every dollar we spend on the child tax credit, we get $8 in return. The return on investment is incredible. So, that data is out there that we can share. The Treasury just released a new report about the impact of the American Rescue Plan. And there was actually a section on the child tax credit, which I was, Rosa and I were pleasantly pleased to see, that talked about Obviously we know the poverty was reduced by almost 50%, but also it found that there was lower than expected unemployment rate among Black and Hispanic Americans, presumably because parents could actually afford childcare with the child tax credit. So we're really excited to see that come out. Like I said, we have data that shows just, again, how this money was spent. It's not the pernicious stereotypes that people think. It all bears out. And one other feature we like to flag is there are a lot of which I hadn't heard this term before, but grand families in this country where its grandparents are taking care of their grandkids. They were finally eligible to get the child tax credit for the first time. And it's I believe it's around 5 million grand families in this country, around 9.1 million kids. So that's a lot of children. And so these are all things that we like to talk about. I'll quote Congresswoman Del Bene. She said, "There's a price we pay for not extending the child tax credit." We saw this in the data bear out, whether it's the poverty numbers, the hunger numbers. I mean, Rosa's like, I'm gonna channel her for a minute. She's like, we cut hunger by a quarter. Like the impact is real. To be candid, I don't know that we need more research. We know it worked, and we just need to bring it back. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but just share your stories. We still hear from constituents about what not having the child tax credit means to them, and I think those are the most powerful stories that we can share. And the Dems, like Anna said, we have pretty much everyone from our caucus on, a few for very inside baseball jurisdictional issues, but they're strong supporters. We need Republicans on board. And so, finding those members in particular that I don't think, Mike Johnson or Jason Smith are going to say their constituents aren't hardworking. It's just they're working jobs that they don't make enough to be eligible. And so, again, bring those constituent stories, talk about how the money was spent and why it's so critical. Rosa likes to call the child tax credit the antidote to inflation. We know lower income families bear the brunt of inflation. The child tax credit would help with that. So I think I'll leave it at that, and happy to answer any and all questions.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. I've been jotting down so many of your words of wisdoms and great talking points, as well as so many of the points that Anna lifted up. I wanted to, first of all, thank everyone on this call who's done a lot of work to get so many co-sponsors on the American Families Act. And it would be amazing if we could get some Republicans on the act as well. Before we go over to questions, Steve, can you put up the slide? FRAC has created in its Food Action Network, our FAN, an opportunity for you all to take action, as well as share this with others to take action. And we'll be sending this out, the slide deck out after the webinar. But this is an opportunity for you to go onto the FRAC Action Network, and it's already pre-populated for you. You just put in your zip code and it will tailor a message to send to your representatives and or your senators on the importance of passing a fully refundable child tax credit. So we really encourage you to do that, AKA you can do it now. It's individual, not organizational. So, you don't have to go up the chain of command to get permission to sign your organization on. You can do it. And we hope as one takeaway from this webinar that you will be able to do this and get colleagues, friends, and family to do this as well. It's a quick and easy step that we've made for you. We also have the research brief, and I'm spacing on what are those things called? The things that are in the menu.
Oh, QR codes.
QR codes. Thank you. Of course, I know them on menus as a foodie, but now we're doing them for advocacy assets as well. So click on the QR code, get that information. And we have social media messages and graphics that you can use to push the word out on the importance of this child tax credit. And, our framing, since these are all the anti-hunger activists, is how this really supports addressing poverty, the root cause of food insecurity, as well as helping people put food on the table. All right, so we are going to open it up to questions. As Steve mentioned, please put your questions in the Q&A. And we have one question right now from Lily Hogue. And this is about the polling. Wondering if there's any polling related to people knowing how much the CTC will cost, right? Sort of the elephant in the room. This is expensive. So any polling related to people being willing to spend for this?
Yeah, so I have 3 points to make in response to that question. First is that it is expensive not to do this. And as food advocates, you know that poverty costs our society hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And every study that looks at the long-term return on investment on the child tax credit shows that for every dollar you spend, you get $10 back in long-term societal benefits. A lot of that is actually improved health for kids and families. Also, staying in school longer, improved learning, those kinds of issues. So one thing is, this is an investment in our future that more than pays for itself. That's one answer. Second answer is, you actually don't have to pay for this in Congress. If it's part of a tax package, they didn't pay for their tax breaks for corporations and wealthy people, so they shouldn't have to pay for this. And then the third answer is, there is polling that the public overwhelmingly supports, making wealthy people and corporations pay their fair share. And so if you add that piece of it to any public policy, public support actually increases. And Americans for Tax Fairness has done a lot of that. And then I'll just close with a quote from Congresswoman Gwen Moore, which is like, we have to stop pretending there's not enough money. There's plenty of money in this country. And there's plenty of money in this country. And I'll give you one specific example from Deputy Secretary Treasury Wally Adeyemo, which is the IRS right now is working because it got money to modernize and cracking down on wealthy tax cheats. This isn't increasing taxes. This is just getting the money that the IRS is owed. If you did that, if you closed the tax gap on the top 0.5% of people in this country, just collected the taxes that they owed, you get $160 billion a year. That is more than enough money to pay for the best version of the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, and I'm sure we could get some SNAP and WIC in there as well.
Thanks so much, Anna. You can see why we invited Anna on the webinar. She has such amazing advocacy strategies and knowledge. All right, we have another question. Who are the biggest opposers to expanding the child tax credit, and what needs to be done to convince these individuals? So Caitlin, you want to give a shot at addressing these issues?
Yes. Obviously, Build Back Better had, I believe it was a 3-year extension, and Build Back Better did not cross the finish line for a plethora of reasons. I know folks like to attack a certain senator from West Virginia, but let's also be clear, there were 50 Republicans that did not support this as well. And those are folks that live in states that would benefit the most from the expanded child tax credit. Their constituents would. And so Anna talked about their tax package was not paid for. It went to the richest 1/10 of 1%. It did nothing to help families. And so we like to focus that this is a tax credit that the same value for 90% of children, got the same dollar amount. This is a near universal policy. It helps our most vulnerable families, our working families. I talked to a number of unions about this. For their members, they already got the child tax credit, but it's the monthly component and the increased value that really made a huge difference for them. And so again, it's spreading those stories about how, and that's what Rosa's like, we just need to mobilize, and like we have to constantly be putting pressure on folks for them to understand, again, the cost of not doing this, and also that folks are going to remember how the position members took. There's so much data out there, and I don't know, some members like at this point probably don't care about the data because it doesn't fit their worldview, unfortunately. But there's this narrative that people will spend it on like drugs or alcohol, or they'll gamble, or they won't work. I mean, it, like Anna said earlier, it's kind of offensive and a bit odd to think that someone's going to quit over their jobs for, $300 a month check. I mean, you can't survive on that anywhere. Maybe they quit their third job because they can finally, work two jobs and have a little bit more time to spend with their kids. And so just continuing to share like the impact this policy has had on members of their communities, I think is what's going to make a difference. I think in some cases, a lot of their members are kind of quiet on it. They don't like explicitly attack it. I mean, they'll talk about the work requirements, but I also think they're in a bind because a lot of their members benefited for the first time from the expansion, and that shouldn't be that. I don't think that's lost on them. But so I think just again sharing those stories and mobilizing, and as Rosa would say, write letters to the editors, call their offices, stage your own press conference. Like these are all things that can be done.
Thanks so much. And FRAC stands ready to help anti-hunger groups do some of these great actions that Caitlin and Anna have talked about. So please, reach out to Susan or reach out to me, and we can put you in touch with lobbying visits. We can put you in touch with some, boilerplate text for that you can adapt for letters to the editor, opinion pieces. Take advantage of what we've put in the report and adapt it to your needs. We're ready and eager to help you. Okay, well, I
see another question actually.
Oh, we got another question. Okay. Great question. It's from anonymous attendee, but it's a great question. Is there a space for corporations to actually help push this initiative? I know that might not happen, but has there been any advocacy from the private sector?
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Caitlin.
No, Anna, you can start.
Okay, so yes, I mean, we have been actually asking folks who support the child tax credit to do two things. One is publicly state that they won't support any corporate tax extension package unless CTC is included, and then also say that when corporations come lobbying and ask them for tax breaks, that they tell those corporations to actually go ask Republicans to support the child tax credit. And it shouldn't just be because they want their corporate tax breaks. It should be because of all the economic benefits that you get when you invest in children and you invest in families. So there's a real argument to be made when the monthly tax credits came into people. Local economies got that money right away, right? Because people went out and they spent it on local grocery stores and, local businesses, or even Walmart if that was local. So there's a strong economic argument to be made for corporate America to be jumping into this, not just for selfish, I want my tax break reason, but because it's good for them.
Yeah. And Rosa's message has always been, she is not opposed to the R&Ds, like the big one, but there's a number of other things they would like to try to clear the deck for before 2025. And she's not opposed to R&D. But she's like, but we can't, it's no R&D without CTC. If we're going to do something for the wealthiest corporations that already got massive tax breaks in 2017, we need to do something for kids and their families. And so that's why I raised earlier with what has been advanced in the Ways and Means Committee. It's a doubling of the standard deduction, if I'm remembering this correctly. It was so long ago. That's not going to help the families that have been left behind, or those like on the verge. That's going to continue to help the families that the Republicans also made eligible, that they receive the full $2,000 credit up to $400,000 for a joint filing couple, not anything for below. So Rosa's view is we can do all of these things, and it shouldn't be a binary. And, she said to, businesses, like, you have to take us seriously. Like, we are not doing this. She also said it last night with a few folks, like, we're not doing anything on the corporate side without something for children and their families. And she is very serious about that. And I think the Dems are as well. And, like, if we can give them a tax break, why aren't we doing anything for our kids and our families who need it more and haven't gotten that help that is so desperately needed? So, yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your insights, your time, and your advocacy strategies. So many things to take away and apply from this webinar. And good luck on the Hill. Hopefully we'll have a speaker by the end of the day. Thanks to everyone who attended, and we look forward to connecting with you and getting some portions of an important child tax credit in any end of the year tax extender or other legislative vehicle. Thanks one and all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.